Hi everybody, good afternoon. I am happy to have you on. Let me tag a few of my friends, see if we can bring some friends on this afternoon. I always love it when you can join me live. A lot of people are just not able to do that. So I am happy to have your comments. If you're on the replay, let me know it's a replay and I'll know you're not live. But I hope you are alive. So I'm going to share a few things with you this afternoon that I think maybe we all can relate to. And it's a small thing, but it's a really big thing in terms of how we are reacting to our new environment and some of the new restrictions that we have in our environment. First of all, I want to give credit this afternoon for the bulk of the information that I'm going to give you. And also, in addition to that, I do a lot of studying during the week. I look at a lot of medical research, and I'm always happy to share those resources with you too. If you really have an interest in the topic and you want to dig a little further, I'm happy to share that. But I was listening into a series that one of our top doctors in my company has been doing over the last couple of weeks. And this particular series is on hormones. Now, I'm not talking about the hormones that you might relate to, typically, that most of us ladies can relate to. I'm talking about the hormones that we have that activate our emotions. And particularly today, I'm going to talk about the happiness hormone. And I'm going to share with you some things that I think you really will relate to about what's been happening with this happiness hormone in our day-to-day lives. And some of the things that we have in our normal environment to activate this happiness hormone and these happiness pathways, we've really been deprived of. And I'm going to give you some very specific examples. And they're really primarily due to pandemic and lockdown and really the change in the way we socialize and interact with other human beings. And I really think that I can relate to this, and that's why I wanted to share it with you. There's just some days recently, and maybe you felt this way too, that you're a little bit off, maybe feeling a little bit down, a little bit sad, and you really don't have a real reason or a real explanation as to why, because generally you're healthy and everyone in your family is healthy, and maybe you've had some pretty good situations in your life over this last year, exactly 1 year. But somehow there are just days that you can't really shake that sort of blues feeling and that sadness off. And there's a really good reason for that. We have some very specific hormones in our brain that activate this feeling of happiness. And it really is associated with a reward system. These are pathways that really kind of relate back to how we became mammals and how we became humans. So the happy chemicals are in your brain, and almost everything that makes you feel happy is linked to one of 4 hormones. And today I'm going to talk about dopamine. Now, you probably heard about dopamine, but I want to tell you how maybe your dopamine is a little off and is causing maybe some feelings of sadness and a little offness in our current situation. So the dopamine hormone is associated with motivation and reward. And sometimes I'm going to talk about these kinds of rewards, but it's the feeling that we get when we're setting out on something new and we have a new goal. And it is the chemical and it's the reaction that gives us the motivation to go for the goal. And it's very important, not just in the big goals, but in the very small day-to-day things. And the converse of that, which I'm not going to go into today, the lack of this dopamine can actually cause depression. and it can explain low motivation. And if you've kind of been in that phase or know someone in that phase, you understand they really sometimes don't even have motivation to get up off the couch every day. But there are some ways that you can boost dopamine. But I think that what we have seen today, that these day-to-day things are really the things that are really affecting us. The normal day-to-day things that we have experienced in our previous life have been taken away. And so a lot of the normal, these are really pathways that we've conditioned ourselves to respond to. Those have been taken away, and I'm going to share those very specifically for you in a minute. You're going to see this big picture unfolding. And for a lot of people, they've substituted, our body really needs this hormone, and a lot of people have substituted that feeling with some artificial stimulation like caffeine and sugar, comfort foods, and things like that, which, if you've read anything over this past year, there's been an associated increase in depression and weight gain and lack of motivation and lack of energy. All of those things can come down to some very understandable things when we put this whole picture together. So we want to make sure that we understand there's some little tools that I'm going to share with you today that will help you activate that very necessary dopamine without using the bad answers to that. And then we can maybe make some corrections in our goals here, and getting back to what is really what we should feel every day, which is really a feeling of happiness and reward. So each time you take a step along the pursuit of these goals and this reward, that dopamine is reactivated, and this pathway actually becomes big enough to form a new habit. So some of us, and maybe you did also, had some new goals that we really wanted to form during this pandemic time. But some of those personal goals can really translate to other healthy things like a new hobby, a new sport, recreational things like even walking, a new sport that maybe the reward system of learning that new sport. Like I know people that have done a lot of walking, and I know other people that have started a new sport that they can do, like pickleball or something like that they've never done before. So it's the anticipation and the achievement and the goal setting that you accomplish that then begins to activate these dopamine pathways. Hobbies can do the same thing. Any kind of hobby can do the same thing. It's really the reward that activates this all-important dopamine. And when you're lacking it, life can be pretty boring. So here's some things, some very practical examples that we've been lacking that have everything to do with this happiness hormone. Hugs, social contact. In the South, we hug a lot. In other countries around the world, it's more than a hug. It's a kiss on one cheek. In some countries, it's a kiss on both cheeks. All kinds of things that are a physical recognition and a physical greeting that actually activates dopamine. So when we have had those cultural norms actually taken away from us, then we're feeling this lack of this dopamine activation that leads to maybe just a little sadness in your life. It sounds very simple, but it's actually very, very deep in the science, and it's been studied an awful lot. So some of the things that we've been without, not just hugs, but a smile. So visualize this. Masks. We're not going to have a mask discussion, but masking actually has taken away the physical recognition of this person that you're coming in contact with. And sometimes these are dear friends. These are longtime friends. Facial recognition is very, very important to activating dopamine. Now, I'll tell you who's very, very good at that. Actors, of course, but people that are in marketing and media. Very, very savvy on how to activate that dopamine response that's looking for a reward when it's activated. And it literally could be a buying response. But those smiles, for me, and I've had this experience several times, maybe you have, there are people who have very expressive eyes without the rest of their face. There are other people who don't have expressive eyes. Some people who actually have maybe dark and, naturally not expressive and maybe even somewhat angry. It just depends. We've had that very physical thing taken away from us in this past year. So hugs and smiles and this personal response that comes with a physical greeting or the physical presence of other people has been removed. So we have been lacking in some of these all important things that we need to activate this hormone called dopamine. So it really made me think when I heard this doctor do this presentation earlier in the week about when you go days without that interaction and without that activation of that dopamine, it does really work on you. Some of the examples that they gave, pets have been an incredible comfort during this lockdown and this pandemic. They've been with us, and some, in many cases, been more physically present for people that are working at home because of a pet. So the simple thing like being close to a pet or petting your pet can actually activate that dopamine. So really small things that you can do. But I want to give you a really, really important quote as I in my sharing today. And this, I did some study on, there's a lot of studies about these hormones, and you can get real deep in the science, but I want to give you this one really important quote. Studies have shown that activating the hormone dopamine comes with an associated reaction. It can go both ways. It can be in fear, or it can be a response to a loved one or someone that you're familiar with. But it's the expectation of the reward that triggers the brain in mammals, and releases the energy to react to the reward. So can I say that that expectation and that trigger is actually in the brain of all mammals, and that releases that energy, that dopamine that causes you to react. And it's very real. It's very physical. So just one more question before I want to end today. There's some healthy things that you can do. As I mentioned, hobbies, sports, new goals. I've had some. I do my business almost exclusively online, like a lot of people do. And the technology during this lockdown and this pandemic has really challenged all of us to find new ways of using that technology. And you have to really be on top of that if you're going to run a business. That's really been my challenge during this time. But I want to mention one other little thing. How about shopping? Remember the old days when you used to go to the mall, maybe meet a friend, have lunch, look at the clothes, try the clothes on? There's a dopamine response that comes along with that we're missing. And it's like it just doesn't exist the same way if you're doing online shopping. So I want to challenge you today to be aware of this, because this really may be a very simple answer to some of those days where you may feel a little off a little sad, or a little blue. A very simple thing that you need to remember is just to get down and do something fun, do something easy to activate that dopamine for today, and retrain your brain using that dopamine response, and avoid some of the bad and unhealthy substitutes that we're turning to, like caffeine and sugar, comfort foods, ice cream, whatever your passion may be, because those are the things that we unknowingly are turning to get back to that dopamine happiness. So thanks for joining me. I love it when I have new people on today. Thanks so much for watching. I love it when you comment and share, ask questions. I always post my videos on my YouTube channel, and I'm always happy to share more information about where my information comes from, and I invite you to do that too as well. So see you next time. Get that dopamine for the next week. Thanks, guys.